Chapter 4. Ripples of Consequences. The usual morning buzz is accompanied by the shuffle of chairs and the low hum of officers exchanging notes on recent cases. The briefing room, with its stark fluorescent lighting and rows of mismatched desks, carries the smell of stale coffee and paper. Lieutenant O'Brien stands at the front, his presence commanding despite his casual stance. A tall, broad-shouldered white man with graying temples and sharp blue eyes, O'Brien exudes the authority of someone who had seen it all and taken no nonsense along the way. His crisp uniform is immaculate, the brass on his badge gleaming under the artificial light. Ethan slides into his seat just as O'Brien's voice cuts through the chatter. "O'Brien? All right, listen up. We've got a surge in car thefts over in the West District. Pattern suggests a chop shop might be in play, so keep your eyes open. And remember, it's not about being a hero. It's about keeping the peace." The room quiets as O'Brien's gaze sweeps across the officers. He nods toward Sammy, a grin tugging at the corner of his lips. "O'Brien, and before I forget, belated happy birthday to Officer Jackson. I trust you had a responsible celebration." Laughter ripples through the room as Sammy holds up his coffee cup in mock toast. As the briefing ends and chairs scrape against the tiled floor, O'Brien motions for Ethan to stay behind. "O'Brien." "Brooks, a word." Ethan approaches the desk, his heart racing slightly as O'Brien hands him an envelope. The lieutenant's face remains impassive, though there is a flicker of pride in his eyes. "O'Brien, Major Rickman dropped this off this morning." With a steady hand, Ethan opens the envelope. His eyes scan the letter inside, the words confirming what he'd hoped for. He'd aced his detective exam and was now under consideration for the position. The weight of the achievement settles over him, but so does a gnawing sense of unease. Recent choices, both personal and professional, loom large in his mind. "O'Brien, good work. But remember, the brass will be watching. Stay sharp, Brooks." Ethan nods, pocketing the letter. "Ethan, thanks, Lieutenant. I won't let you down." O'Brien gives him a curt nod before turning back to the next officer needing his attention, leaving Ethan to navigate the mingled pride and uncertainty of the moment. The patrol car hummed quietly as Ethan flipped through his notebook, the pages filled with scrawled notes and case updates. Beside him, Sean leaned back in his seat, one hand draped lazily over the steering wheel. Sean, a white man in his late 40s, had the rugged look of someone who had spent too much time in the sun and too little caring about sunscreen. His short-cropped hair was peppered with gray, and his sharp green eyes carried a permanent glint of cynicism. His uniform, while technically regulation, always seemed slightly askew, his tie loosened and his badge scratched from years of use. The silence between them was thick, filled only by the crackle of the radio as mundane updates filtered through. Sean's fingers drummed against the steering wheel, a sign of his restlessness. Sean broke the silence first. "Sean, you know I've been thinking about this detective thing of yours, climbing the ladder, huh?" Ethan glanced at him, unsure whether the comment was praise or something else. "Ethan, that's the plan." Sean's lips curled into a smirk, his tone laced with condescension. "Sean, don't get cocky, kid. Up there it's all politics. Half the job's knowing whose toes not to step on." Ethan grinned, determined to keep the mood light. "Ethan, good thing I've got you as my mentor. Diplomacy must be your strong suit." Sean chuckled dryly but said nothing, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. Ethan couldn't help but notice the tension in Sean's jaw, a silent testament to whatever was gnawing at him beneath the surface. Their radio crackled, breaking the moment. A voice announced a disturbance near the jewelry store they had scouted earlier. Radio voice, distorted. "Disturbance near the jewelry store. Units respond." Ethan reached for the ignition. "Ethan, guess we're on." Sean leaned forward, a sharp edge in his voice. "Sean, let's hope it's not another false alarm. I hate wasting time." Ethan started the car, the low growl of the engine mirroring the unspoken tension that lingered between them. Chapter 6. Unseen Lines. Jason Watts stepped out of the pharmacy, clutching a small paper bag of medication. The parking lot was dimly lit, the overhead lamps casting long, flickering shadows across the cracked asphalt. Jason moved with a quiet confidence, despite the weariness etched into his features. A black man in his early 30s, Jason carried himself with the poise of someone who had been raised to believe the world was his to conquer. His dark brown skin gleamed faintly under the fluorescent light, his sharp cheekbones and neatly trimmed beard giving him a distinguished appearance. Jason's childhood had been one of privilege. Growing up in a leafy suburb, he'd had the support of both parents who ensured he never had to worry about where his next meal would come from or if the lights would stay on. His father, a successful attorney, and his mother, a college professor, had instilled in him the values of discipline and respect. Weekends were spent on family outings, piano lessons, and quiet dinners where intellectual debates were encouraged. Jason had known security and stability, but it had also made him acutely aware of how different his life was from others, a knowledge that came with its own burdens. Tonight, however, none of that mattered. Gloria's worsening fever was the only thing occupying his mind. The memory of her lying on the couch, her brow damp with sweat and her voice weak as she urged him to hurry, tightened his chest. He adjusted his coat against the chill, the cold biting through the layers, and quickened his pace toward his Lexus. As he crossed the lot, headlights illuminated his path. He paused briefly, his senses prickling as he noticed a patrol car idling nearby. Jason's jaw tightened. He recognized the feeling, the unspoken tension of being watched and judged. He shrugged it off, unwilling to let them see his discomfort. He climbed into his Lexus, the car's pristine condition a deliberate choice. It was more than just a mode of transport. It was a symbol of the life he had built, a life that demanded respect. Inside the patrol car, Ethan Brooks sat in the driver's seat, his hands gripping the wheel as his eyes followed Jason's movements. Ethan's light brown hair was slightly tousled, his sharp blue eyes scanning the scene with a mix of unease and weariness. "Ethan, he's clean," Ethan said after a beat, though his tone lacked conviction. Beside him, Sean leaned forward, his fingers tapping impatiently against the door. Sean's rugged features were hardened by years on the force, but it was the bitterness in his green eyes that gave away his deeper struggles. A white man in his late 40s, Sean had grown up in a broken home. His mother had fled from his abusive father when Sean was just a boy, dragging him to a small, rundown apartment on the other side of town. Life had been a constant battle, scraping by on his mother's meager income, enduring the sneers of wealthier kids at school, and wrestling with a simmering anger he couldn't always control. Becoming a cop had been his way out, but it hadn't erased the resentment that had been instilled in him early on. "Sean, you sure about that? That car doesn't scream regular pharmacy run to me." Ethan sighed, his grip on the wheel tightening. "Ethan, we ran the plates. He's good. Let's not create a problem where there isn't one." Sean leaned back with a scowl, his jaw tightening as his fingers drummed against the armrest. "Sean, we're doing our job, Brooks. Following him isn't a crime." Ethan said nothing, the weight of Sean's words settling over him like a heavy fog. He shifted the car into gear, the patrol car rolling out to trail Jason's Lexus. The tension between them was palpable, an unspoken conflict simmering beneath the surface. Ethan's stomach churned, a mix of anger and resignation brewing as he questioned how much longer he could ignore the lines being crossed. Jason glanced in his rearview mirror, his jaw tightening further as he noticed the patrol car following at a measured distance. His mind raced, torn between frustration and apprehension. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening as he willed himself to stay calm. The weight of his upbringing pressed against him in this moment, the knowledge that respectability wasn't always enough to shield him from suspicion. In the patrol car, Sean smirked, his green eyes narrowing as he watched Jason's taillights. "Sean, let's see where Mr. Clean is headed," Sean muttered, his tone laced with condescension. Ethan's gaze remained fixed on the road ahead, his jaw clenched as guilt gnawed at him. He wanted to push back, to argue, but the weight of Sean's seniority and his own internal conflict kept him silent. The car hummed quietly as they followed Jason onto the main road, the distance between them a fragile thread that could snap at any moment.
To be continued. Thank you for listening to the audiobook The Other Side of the Law, written by Michael Liverpool. Be sure to click subscribe, hit the like button, ding the notification bell because there is more to come, and get in the comments and let your thoughts be heard. Thank you for listening and enjoy your day.